Happy International Women's Day, folks. It's Wednesday. I'm Will, and we are here to discuss how a crisis can bring folks together. And what do we learn through crisis? So I'm doing something special this month. Last week I had a repeat guest, Cindy, who created a whole new life in the 1 year since I met her. Today, our guests are Cristina Ambroselli and Grace Brady, both of whom have been guests on this show. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be great? It's been 3 years since the world closed, and the three of us, Will and Grace, and our executive producer, Cristina, got together as part of a large team, multiple teams, to try to reopen New York City. How much our lives are different today than they were 3 years ago. 2 years ago, I don't know, and maybe we'll have, if we have time, we can ask Grace who went first. But Grace and I were the first two about 2 years ago to realize, okay, we need to do something else. So I'm super excited to talk about this today because I encounter so many people that feel like they're stuck. They don't know what to do. They think change is scary. And we're just three people who, in a crisis, came together, decided to make some changes. And I would say the three of us are thriving. So I want to bring my co-hosts or co-guests up on the stage. Cristina, I'm doing this in alphabetical order. So Ambroselli goes first and Brady comes next. How are you, ladies? Happy International Women's Day.
Thank you. Excuse me.
So I'm going to ask the viewers to let us know where they're tuning in from today and whether they're watching live or on replay, because this is available, and you'll be able to watch this for your in viewing enjoyment later, Grace and Cristina. But okay, let's go first. Cristina, as you could see, is sitting in a car and she's taken her lunch break to join us. So let me set this up. So 3 years ago, the three of us all worked at the Met. We have all since left. The crisis of COVID bonded us together in many, many ways. So Cristina, introduce yourself and tell us what you're up to these days.
Hi, everyone. I was so fortunate to work with both Will and Grace at the Met before we all left at different times and for different reasons. I took some time off, which I spoke about the last time I was a guest on this show. I took a couple of months off from work just to spend more time with the family. We moved out of New York City, and I just recently started a new job working for an interior design firm. So super, super creative, loving it so far, and very different than what I was doing before.
Well, I'm super excited, and you're the first season 2 guest to be a repeat. Grace was from the past. She was about a year ago, so she was due. So welcome to the show today, Cristina. It's great to have you, and congratulations. Grace, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll get into the questions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Grace Brady, the other half of the Will and Grace show. Happy to see my former colleagues, Will and Cristina, as always. Also, a shout out. Hi, Derek Swift, live from New York, a former colleague as well. I am in Los Angeles, and my elderly mother lives with me, and I'm caring for her. So my life is extremely different, but it's very good. I'm not working right now. I was doing some contract work remotely and hope to do some in the future. But right now, the focus is on family.
Which is really great. And I think, the story, and those of us, there are some watching this, they know us individually, but I think our stories are interesting stories because people come together, people work together, right? Work is work. But then when the three of us were thrust into this, let's figure out how to reopen a city after this scary situation was happening, health crisis was happening, I found my particular comfort zone, I suppose, or my area of strength in that we were looking after people. And so the job was no longer about, or my focus was no longer about money and statistics and metrics, which are important, but I was able to focus on people, and that helped me change my life. We each have a different story. So I want to bring up some questions, and I'm going to ask the audience if they have any questions. I'm going to bring up some questions so we can kind of not have me talk all the time and control the conversation. You two know me. But also try to figure out how through our storytelling can we help others who may be thinking about what they want to do to make a change. How can they use a crisis or a situation to their advantage? So the first question I have, and I'm going to be mindful of the time. Cristina, beep that horn when when it's time for you to go. First question I have. Well, first thing I want to say, audience, please put your questions in the comments, and if we have time, I'll bring them up. But the first question I have to get the conversation going for each of you: what did you learn about yourself during the COVID crisis? I just shared mine. I learned that I've got to do something people related. I made my decision. Cristina, you're next. What did you learn about yourself managing the crisis?
Yeah. You know what? I think this is something that we've heard a lot as a result of the pandemic, but I learned that I'm a lot tougher than I thought I was, and a lot stronger than I thought I was. Just being able to deal with all of the challenges and managing everything, not just at work, but even, taking care of kids and personal obligations and doing all of it where it seemed like your plate was so full. And coming out of it being like, oh wow, I made it through, and I didn't just survive. I made it through, and I gained a lot from the experience. And so I think that was a really important lesson for me, that I'm actually a lot stronger and tougher than I think I thought I was before.
I love that, because you, like so many, right? So many of our colleagues and so many people that we worked with across the city were doing what you were doing. Children and homeschooling. I mean, that really was such a difficult time for so many people. And I've always, International Women's Day, I've always admired how you did that, and you did it so well. And you always kept smiling, even though I know there were moments you didn't want to smile. You kept it together.
More than one.
Grace, your turn. What did you learn about yourself during the COVID crisis?
Excuse me, similar to Cristina, and Cristina always did have a smile on, even with her little ones in the background who we loved seeing. She did it with a lot of grace and calm demeanor. I've always considered myself a tough person, but I even felt that through that, going into the office every day, um, during that time, that I was tougher than I thought. But I also learned, some things that I wasn't crazy about myself. The stress, I can handle a lot of stress. And there were times it came out in ways that was not appropriate or nice to my colleagues. And hopefully I made amends with them before I left or apologized. But I'm human, and I did learn that, and I took that with me. And now I feel like I think, and even if I'm in a stressful moment, I try to take a step back before I go postal, as they say.
That's really incredible, because I think I have a little bit of each of you in that, right? You know me, I like people, but I too found strength in a way that I didn't know. And Grace, I was always like the okay guy to make things happen. But like you, there were moments that you were tested and you were maybe shorter than you wanted to be. I'm talking about myself, or didn't
Yeah.
respond in the most kind manner. And I just think that that's always important to recognize. So I think that's a great thing to learn about yourself,
I
because you
mean,
just
there was one instance that I didn't even recognize myself when I lashed out at a colleague who I was very close to, and she was an excellent one. And I just like dropped the F bomb in front of my manager and at her. And I went back to my desk and I'm like, who are you? Like,
Right, right.
that's not cool. And she came and apologized to me because and I said, no, I have to apologize too. It was
Right.
just the heat of building up, but wow, great
Yeah.
lesson.
Maybe we can dedicate another show to the time I kind of lost it on camera. Christina was a witness. And I did my best Faye Dunaway and Mommy Dearest.
That was good.
Similar,
Legendary and
similar,
needed.
you
And
realize, no way. I don't know who this screaming person on camera is, and I
Right.
don't want to be that person, right? So I'm going to go to my next question because I want to make sure we get there's 4 questions, so don't worry, that's not a long list. The next question I want to ask Cristina first. How did you know it was time to change? Like, what was the thing, or when was the moment you knew you needed to make a change for you and your family?
Yeah. Um, I know exactly what moment it was too, as we all have those moments of like realization. It must have been the holiday season of um 2021. So like December 2021, it was the holidays. It's a busy time of year for us at was a busy time at the museum. And there was the Omicron variant was going on in the city. And it felt like, oh my gosh, we've been going through this for 2 years now. And it felt like going back to square one with colleagues getting ill and having to manage an operation. And it was at that moment where I had a moment, I think I was at home and I was like, all I want to do is bake cookies with my kids and like not deal with all the rest of
Right,
everything else going on.
right,
And I realized, I'd been working, holidays and weekends and being in an industry where that, was just part and parcel of the job and always having to be available and on call for emergencies. And I realized that wasn't what I wanted anymore.
right.
And that was really the big moment for me where I knew that I had wanted to make a change just to give myself a different lifestyle than the one that I had.
I think that's great. And I remember the conversation, it was probably a year ago. So much has happened in this very room. 3 years ago, Christina, you told me the world was going to close, and I thought you were crazy. 2 years ago, I was locked in a room in New York, and you told me things I'm processing. And a year ago, I remember being in this very seat, and you were talking about what you just described. And good for you. And look at you now. New job, sitting in a car, watching your watch so you can get back to your new job. Wonderful. I love that. Grace, what about you? How did you know it was time to change?
Well, mine was gradual because I'm older than Christina, and part of it had to do, well, a large part had to do with family. My mom and I lived on the East Coast, and one of my brothers lived on California and has a nephew who I adore, and whom I adore, or who I adore, whatever. And so we decided what's a better time, than moving now when you want it to be closer to family. So it was a combination of things for me. I was tired of working that job. I didn't want a stressful job anymore. And when you're at that level or that position, you're 24/7, whether you like it or not. And
Exactly.
I didn't see my life going that way. And I grappled with it for a long time because people said with my background and my experience, I had peers who were going on to becoming VPs at other museums and this kind of thing. And I felt like that I should want that or strive for that. But I finally accepted I don't want
Right.
that, and I've reached where
That wasn't driving you.
that wasn't driving me anymore. And it's okay. There's still a little voice here saying you could have been a contender kind of thing, but I smack it off and I just accept where I am.
I love that. I remember the moment I was celebrating a friend's birthday, Riverside Park, and the conversation. This was COVID, still COVID time, and I just remember it was it was probably about 2 years ago. And I remember they were talking about traveling and maybe we'll go here, maybe we can rent a house. And I was with my husband Manuel, and I remember the group saying, "Oh, but we have to work around Will because he works, or he has a job." And I remember in that moment just saying, "No, let's make the plans. We'll go." And in that moment, I knew it was the moment I needed to just end one thing to start something new. They thought I was crazy, or that I had too much champagne at the lunch, or that I'd lost my mind. But I knew it was just something instinctually I knew. And the more people told me, "No, you're crazy," the more I was like, "No, it's time." Because of what we just said before, we did what we did. I loved what I did,
Mhm.
but now it was just time for something else. And
Right.
I didn't want to become the bitter old person that hangs on just because you're supposed to hang on, and then
Right.
become something that you're not. And
Right.
I've never looked back or had to shush anything away. I just keep saying thank God every single day.
I mean, I do look back occasionally when I'm feeling like, "Oh, will I ever get another job, or what will my work be like,
Right.
once my mother passes," or, but
Things like
not
that.
enough to be like, "Oh, I wish I was there."
Right.
Mhm.
That's true. I just love that, the three of us have three different stories, and we've known each other's stories, but this is the
Mhm.
first time we're kind of talking about it together. But
Yeah.
with time, right? I'm sitting in
Mhm.
Brazil, you're in California, and Christina's in a parking lot somewhere
New York,
90
yeah.
minutes yeah, 90 minutes north of Manhattan, right? That
Right.
sort of thing. So question number 3, and I see we have a question from the audience, so I want to bring that up in a minute. But question number 3, I've already answered this. I verbalized in Riverside Park that I was leaving my job. It was the very first time it came out of my mouth, and I can remember it clearly. March
Mhm.
25th, 2021. What about you, Christina? When did you first verbalize it? Was it with your husband, your mom, your sister, your son?
I mean, definitely my husband. I went to him and I was like, I don't, I essentially said something along the lines of, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And it's a big decision to make, right? Leaving a job, we had so many, especially when you have so many responsibilities. And yeah, it was something that I needed his partnership on because it had lots of implications for our family.
And two little
So
guys there that
and
you're
my
also
two
taking
kids,
care of.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, no, he was the first person that I spoke to, and we had just like really, really honest conversations about what we wanted from life. And our decision to move out of New York City was one that we made together. It was something we both knew that we wanted. Just for our kids to have different experiences, and we love New York City, and it'll always be of part of our lives and our story. But yeah, no, definitely my husband was the first one. I wasn't going to leave the job without without talking through it with him first.
That's great. I love that. What about you, Grace? When did you first verbalize it? Was it in the moment where you were having a fit at your colleague, or was it a little bit
Um,
more
well, there
interesting?
was one moment, again, not a one I'm proud of, but when the layoffs were going on in the museum, and as in our positions, we had to participate in that,
Mhm.
and we had to work with other colleagues in human resources and legal.
Mhm.
And what I thought was completely a finished product or decision, I was on a call with my manager at the time and HR and legal, and they started asking questions like second guessing what we had already decided, and it was happening in a day or two. And I couldn't believe it, but I said to them, I said, if this doesn't happen, I'll quit. Like, because it just it and they're like, "Oh, no, no, this is just the process." I said, "Maybe I'm coming in at the last minute here," but I said, "This took a lot of thought and it's not easy and blah, blah." So that was just a bad moment, but, I
But
don't
in that
actually rem
moment is when it first came out of your mouth
yeah,
without
I was
moving.
just like, "This is not okay." But it was with my family. I mean, talked to my mom and my brothers, I think, and I don't remember the exact date, but I remember, you know what, I'm able to retire at 55. So my mother's not getting younger. So if we're going to do anything, now's the time, kind of thing.
I vaguely remember some of these conversations, and just being able to reflect back now when the rawness of the moment is in there is always so interesting. One of our former colleagues here, Derek,
Derek,
who's
in the house.
one of my favorite people in the world. He's
Me
just,
too.
talk about somebody who smiles all the time.
Oh,
I don't think I've ever seen Derek not smile.
we
Well,
laughed
Derek,
so much. He
he's
cracked
there.
me in.
So I love this question. You all made significant changes in the past 3 years and took huge risks. Did you ever doubt when making these changes? What was your self-talk like? Great question, Derek.
Yeah, great question.
Grace, do you want to take this first?
Sure. I definitely doubted it because I lived on the East Coast my entire life. But I also started to think, life is short, and the pandemic made me realize that much more. Like,
Right.
if you don't make a change, it's going to be the same. And although it's scary, I definitely had Derek. Some of my self talk, and it's just not a healthy place to be. But I'm a believer in, you make a decision after thinking and processing, and then you don't look back, because if you look back, you're never going to be happy. Now, I'm a human being, and I do look back and I say, oh, I remember in the first 6 months, I'm like, oh, I could have had a job. But now I don't look back. I'm like, this is my life. I'm here. I'm blessed. This is where I'm supposed to be. I miss my friends. I don't really have friends out here. I have a few. I shouldn't make it sound like,
well, David Hansen, who's in the audience, is from California. You guys should just figure it out.
David Hansen, one of the kindest people I have never met, but definitely. So definitely self-talk. But I think if you make a decision, whatever it is, big or small, you can't look back once you make it. Because if you hem and haw, you're never going to change. You're never going to make the decision. And then the decision is made for you. If you, So that's my long-winded answer.
What about, love that answer. And I think you're right. One of my pet peeves nowadays is revisiting decisions that were made. Right? You don't have to stick with a bad decision, but when people who keep questioning, not making a decision is making a decision. So I agree with you, Grace. You made a decision and you move forward. What about you, Cristina? Did you ever have doubts over the self-talk, especially, your situation is different than the two of ours?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to answer, and then I'm going to have to jump and say goodbye. But I would say, especially when you're making decisions that impact other people's lives and not just your own, there's a ton of doubt. Am I doing the right thing? And I think there were a lot of moments that I had where I did second guess myself. Even moving out of New York City, I grew up in Queens. Queens was my home. That's really the only thing that I ever knew. And so to be like, am I actually going to leave my hometown? Can I make it out in the suburbs? You do, all these thoughts absolutely go through your mind and your head. And I think, Grace, I love the way you put it about like making a decision and not looking back to you, because our paths in life, whenever you make a decision, there are so many different paths you can take, right? So many different options. And I feel like you'll lose the value of enjoying being in the moment where you are and where you are right now in life if you keep thinking like, well, if I did A instead of B, where would I be today, or what would be going on now? So I think, a lot of it has to do with accept the doubts for what they are. They're so normal to have doubts with big decisions, and to not be sure if you're doing the right thing, but also let yourself enjoy being where you are right now, wherever that is. And I just want to refer to something you said earlier too, Grace, about having people tell you you could have been the VP of something, or you could have been doing this. I think we're taught from such a young age that there's a straight and narrow path and a ladder that you're supposed to climb. And that there's that, if you're not taking advantage of every opportunity to get a better title or higher pay, that somehow you're doing something wrong. And I think what's been so refreshing, at least for me personally, is to realize that is absolutely not the case for everybody. And that may not be the right thing for you. And I knew it wasn't the right thing for me. And so I love that too, like recognizing that there's so many different paths and there's not one way that you should be going or one thing that you should be doing. Regardless, I think, of what has been so inbred, you have to kind of like unlearn that stuff.
Yep.
There's a lot of unlearning. And Cristina, I know you need to go. You actually answered question number 4, which is what advice would you give others? And I think you just said it so well. You make a decision, you do what's right for your family, and just everybody who's watching this, take a look at Cristina's face and see her glowing. She's loving her new job. She changed her life. She changed it all up, and no regrets. So, Will and Grace love Cristina. So have a great rest of your day. And the rest of the audience, you're just stuck with Will and Grace. Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Cristina. Thanks for joining us today. So now, Grace, there's another question here, which comes from your soon-to-be new BFF, David Hansen.
Thank you, David. Happy to be friends.
So you have a friend in California, thanks to being part of the show. David's question is, what is most important to you now? And I know how Cristina would answer this, but I want to know what's most important to you now?
That's a great question, and I do reflect on it a lot. I've been doing some reading on, not to go dark, but that now I'm approaching, when you approach 60, you're in the 4th quarter of your life. And I'm reading this book about, what is important to you and simplifying your life with the clutter of things and outside noise. For me, health, I think, because there's so much more travel I'd like to do, and I'd like to be fit for my nephew and nieces.
Right.
And I think that's the most, and when I say health, I mean physical, which I'm working on a new fitness thing, but also spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. So for me, that's the most important right now.
So I'll take that question. David and I have become, this is his next question, but David and I have become close through connection through Community of 7, and we've got a group, David, Michelle Cordy, and I, who the 3 of us will be doing a show at the end of the month. We talk a lot about change. I would say the thing so David, I don't know if maybe you could predict what I'm going to say, but what's most important to me is the use of my energy. And I've been reading a lot, and one of my favorite quotes that I've seen lately is stop managing your time, pay attention to your energy, or some such thing. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly. Mm-hmm. And I've just started to realize my entire life, I've moved towards energy. The whole conversation about you should have this title, woulda, shoulda. There were things that you're supposed to want when you're in a certain spot that isn't me. Somehow I followed energy, and it led me to where I'm sitting today. So what I've started to realize, and I've been doing so much more since Thanksgiving, was my whole mantra of do less to be more. I realized I'd been working nonstop, crazy, and you know what it was like, Grace. So many people, it's busy, it's complex, it's layered, and it took me a while to decompress from that. So my first year out of the mat was one of experimenting with tons of things. I was just saying yes and doing way too much and wasn't really in the moment and enjoying it. Thanksgiving came along. I realized, okay, slow it down. And through the slowing down and using one of my favorite words, no, something I never used before, I was able to say, okay, let me find this energy. Where should I be using it? Where should I be conserving it? And where should I just say goodbye to people that may have been in my life? because it's not moving me forward. So for me to use my energy so I can leave something that's lasting, like you just said, Grace, my nieces and nephews and family and friends, making a difference in the world, this community. I mean, I just can't believe that with a camera and with social media, you can create a community that has like-minded people can come together, and that's what I want more of, because it's leading me and others elsewhere. So I love that question, David. This one, Grace, I don't want to know if you want to ask, but he has another question, but I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment. Celine had an interesting comment. She heard once how I know I make the right decision, maybe because it's yours and the past is gone, which is true. You own your decision and the past is gone. So I just wanted to highlight that. I thought that was
that's a great
interesting
comment there.
point.
Thank you, Celine.
The question about
David's next question, and Cristina obviously jumped that hurdle because she's back to work. Somebody hired her. But I wonder, in your interviews, what has it been like for you when people see a career break?
Yeah, I don't honestly know, because the interviews I had early on when I relocated out here, it wasn't that much of a break, so they understood. Now, I do some remote work. So on my LinkedIn, GB Services is sole proprietorship. So I do my contract work through there. But when I apply to other positions, if they let you do a cover letter, I put it in there. But I have to be honest, often I just don't even hear anything back. So I can't really answer that question. I've been reading a lot, and they say employers are more open to the breaks, on your resume. You don't have to, and you can explain it in the interview. But I haven't applied enough, because I really right now need to be remote with my mom. So I may not be getting a outside job for I don't know how long.
Right. The
But it is a
circumstances
good
in your
question.
life are such that you're looking for opportunities that match up with your life. And
Right.
I would imagine a potential employer is going to completely and totally understand that. It's just a matter of making those links, right?
Right.
Finding
The few
the right
headhunters
people.
I've spoken to, I explain it to, and they, as long as you can explain it, it seems to be that people are open to it. But for right now, and that took me a while to accept, like, I'm not going to be working full time right now, and it's a transition. I'm used to go, go, go. And as much as I said, well, I don't want that, there are days I wish I had a place to go to, do something. But trust me, it's all good. I'm
That's
plenty
great.
busy.
Now, as I'm looking at the time as we wrap up the half hour, Christina basically answered this question on the way out. So anybody that's watching or listening to this later, because Grace, you can now find a recorded version of this to listen to on
Lucky
Apple
me.
Podcasts and Spotify. So you can give some advice out there for the world to listen to. But seriously, the whole show, I wanted to bring us together because I love you guys. But I also wanted those who know us and maybe don't know us to understand you can come together, you can do big things, you can change your life, and we have 3 different stories.
Right.
What advice would you give to someone who maybe has some doubts, or they're thinking about that elderly parent? I'm not ready to fully retire yet because I still need some income. What advice would you give them? What would you tell them to do?
I'm kind of a risk taker, but I'm also somebody who processed. This wasn't a decision I made overnight. I wasn't like, okay, pandemic hit, I'm moving out of New York. This was kind of percolating, thinking about my future for several years, and the pandemic helped shape that, and also circumstances, missing my family and my mother aging, and that I could do it, that I could retire at 55 and, with medical benefits, still needing to work, but that's a huge thing. So
It's
I would
huge
just
in the
say,
world today. It's huge.
look at the reality of your life, and, you can make changes more than you think you can. You have to sort of sacrifice some things to do something else, but you decide, is that worth making less money? Is that worth me having a simpler life? Or, it's a very personal thing, but it's all very doable, and you have to trust in yourself that what you're able to handle as a risk.
I
And
love
it's
that.
worth it, in my opinion.
You and I, we're about the same age. I'm older than you are, I think, by
Yes,
what,
you
like
are.
3 weeks or something like
But
that.
yes, you are. You're older than me. Did everyone hear that? This is being recorded. Will Sullivan is older than Grace Brady.
Will Sullivan is older than Grace Brady. It is interesting to think about the advice you'd give to someone, right? I've had people who saw my long career at the Met saying, how can I do something similar to you? I never tell people, I don't like giving people advice based on my story, because my story, my circumstances are my story, my circumstances. And I always tell people, go deep inside, get
Mhm,
quiet. I find it difficult. I used to find it difficult to become quiet. And then that inner voice inside of you, that thing you want to do or that decision you want to make, we get to know ourselves in that silence to say, this is the right thing. So you would get
mhm,
this, Grace, right? You knew, this is something I want to do at this time in my life for my mom, for my
mhm,
family. And you
mhm.
just know. And
Right.
so while you have a story, Christina had a story, I have a story, I think that each individual needs to think about their circumstances, whether or
Mhm,
not they want to take risks. Like you, I love like jumping off a cliff. I love trying new things.
mhm.
It's just, I think that keeps us, I don't know, energized and
Yep,
interesting. But that would be my advice. Get quiet and think about it. The last thing I would tell somebody, don't ask everybody their opinion.
that's right.
And certainly don't ask those who know you the opinion, because often, and you could disagree with me, Grace, often those who know us best or the closest to us know the version of us we are in this moment. Internally, we know there's something else we want to do,
Mhm.
some place else we want to be. Most people will want to protect you and keep you in the stable situation. That was my
Right.
case.
I think
You
there's a
want to
lot
be
of
the
truth
man.
to that. There's some people close to me who are like, "Oh, go for it," but yeah, and I think it comes from a place of caring,
It comes from a place of caring,
concern.
but they're
Um,
not going to tell you, "Hey, Grace, it's good. Jump off that cliff and see what
yeah,
happens."
it
Right?
should be fun, right? I do agree with you on, I mean, I'm a huge believer in the power of solitude and silence. Um, Meditation or even just sitting quietly all my life, there's a huge power in that, and it's scary. I think a lot of people don't like to sit quietly because they're afraid of what they will hear or
Right.
feel, and in silence, all is available, not mine.
It's
Yes,
great,
me, I agree.
right?
Yep.
It really. I'm learning this lesson so much in the last few
I wish I
months.
knew it more when I was younger,
Right.
um, but, with age, we get wisdom, so it's all good.
So, Grace, as we start to wrap up here, we answered all the questions I had up on the screen. We've had some really great questions and comments from the audience here. I think I would leave this for anybody watching or listening to, especially in this ever-changing world, right? We touched on so many things. We talked about the lockdowns and COVID and changing jobs and families and aging. The world is constantly changing. And we're now in a particular moment in history where change is the norm and things will continue to be crazier and more unpredictable. But the more that you can be inside yourself and understand what it is that drives you, and that you show up in your life each and every day authentically you.
Mhm,
And a couple of comments about loving Grace's honesty and
mhm.
Grace's ability. You'll look through the comments. You're honest, and I think that that's what people need to become more of, because we don't live in a time necessarily where that's rewarded, because
Yeah.
everything is a facade. I don't know how to
Or you
describe.
don't know what to believe, you know,
Correct.
you question,
Correct.
"Oh, is that real?" Or, my one last thing I would say is, because the world is so crazy and it's been for a while, I can't stand politics. I hate all that. I have friends on all spectrums of the,
Yep.
and I'd never discuss it because it doesn't matter to me. I
Right.
believe what I believe, but I don't have to spout
You
it
don't
out.
have to preach to others. There's
Right.
no reason to preach.
But I think the importance is on an everyday level, the interaction you have directly with the person in front of you, that's what's gonna make a difference in the world.
Right.
So if there I'm in the grocery store and a checkout person gets something wrong, do I blow up at that person? Do I just stay patient? All those things are gonna have a ripple effect, and I believe that wholeheartedly as I get older and older. And I am much better at not swearing at people for stupid reasons.
Good, good for you, Grace. I love ending on this note. I love quote, the Dolly Parton quote, find out who you are and do it on purpose. I think this conversation today really reinforced that.
That is
What
good.
I'd add to this too is we're constantly finding out who we are. Like the Will that will soon be 58, 58. I
Older than
turned
me,
50,
yes,
yes,
correct,
58. The
okay.
58-year-old Will is different than the 57, 56, 55. And I'm counting on the 59 and the 60 with health and with all that we're blessed with, that I
Mhm,
keep changing. What
mhm,
is my purpose going to be? So it's
right,
not that one thing. And
that's right,
so that's where I see it, and that's what this quote means to me. We're supposed to change. We're supposed to evolve.
agree.
So I'm thrilled that you and Christina took the time to come speak to us, and
Thanks
those
for having us. It was
old
fun.
Met colleagues who may
That's
be
right.
watching or listening, you know where to find
Yes,
us.
Derek, good to see you in type.
And the greatest thing here, Grace, is that you have a new friend in
I know a
California.
friend, David Hansen.
David Hansen, the
Thank
kindest
you.
man on the West Coast by far. And I just want to thank everyone. Again, a little bit of a plug. You can now listen to this. You can watch the replay, or you can listen to us have this conversation on Apple or Spotify. Doesn't
Look
that
at
sound
you,
like
Will.
fancy? Yeah, it's like so fancy, right, Grace?
The new Oprah.
Yeah. Hey, you got to start somewhere. And I just
Absolutely.
am so indebted that you've been part of this journey. I really appreciate you, Grace. I
Thank
appreciate this audience and this community. And just keep on being kind, folks, and just keep on smiling. Find the bright spots each day. And
exactly.
with that, I'm ending the broadcast. And Grace, stay backstage so we can really talk a little bit more. I want to catch up.
Will do.
Take
Have
care.
a blessed day, everybody.
Bye bye, everyone.